Greetings, salutations, Charlton66 here, once again with another video. Going to talk about a little various topics here and there. Nothing really specific on pickups or hauls or anything like that. Just a few things about fandom, about correspondence, that type of thing. One of the few things I did pick up for like $2 a piece, but the reason I'm going to show them because I think it's kind of weird on how I got them from dealers. One's from 1948. It's these Walter Lantz New Funnies. So number 141, 1948. And Woody Woodpecker here is using a saw on a bass fiddle. And then the next issue I picked up, and again, it's a 1951. It's a DC. Although it's not a superhero DC, it's still 50s DC, which they're harder to come by for some reason. I don't understand why, or I don't see it. Why they're so hard to come by, but they are. I know the print runs were high. I think they're just coveted, and people are keeping them, and not putting them in the market. But anyway, Comic Cavalcade number 46, I believe. Yeah, 46 from 1951, and again, the Fox here is doing the same thing that Woody Woodpecker was doing, and they're different publisher. I don't know, maybe it was a gag back then, but they're doing the same thing. And I bought them from two separate dealers, so it was at an antique store, so it wasn't like at a combo shop. So they're not really in that great of shape, but a 50s DC for a few bucks, and a nice. I love Walter Lantz cartoons, so it was nice to have that. I'm not a big Disney fan, but I like the Merry Melody stuff and Walter Lantz stuff. So if I see it and I pick it up for a good price, I'll have it for the collection. So, and onward to the thing about correspondence, and kind of like how fandom is now compared to years ago, even up to 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Things have changed a lot. One of the things I'm going to talk about is correspondence, like I said, but in the realm of how things work now with how instant everything is with Instagram and Twitter and YouTube here. YouTube is just that next level of fandom. I've said that before, because long as it's positive, it's a great tool. But again, I don't get into the ins and outs of issues that people have with one another, and which is unfortunate type of thing. Because I think if people had to sit down and really think about what they're getting ready to say and what they're getting ready to do, things would be a lot better here. But things are so off the cuff with the emotion, off the cuff of your feelings at the moment, that no one stops and thinks about what they're going to say and do. Unlike back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, where you had to sit down and write a letter where your thoughts are your thoughts, but you're taking your emotions are taking a back seat, meaning you're thinking about what you want to say. You don't want to sound like an idiot. You don't want to sound like you're doing something just because you can, and you just want to say anything you want to say, because there's other people's feelings are involved, other people's living could be, their living is involved, depending on how bad things can get. But one of the things that I was going through my collection and wanted, off on fandom as well. I'm going to talk about a guy named Larry Ivy here in a minute, which I recommend this new issue of Alter Ego, which Sandy Plunkett does, which he is a phenomenal artist in himself. Some of you might remember his stuff from the 80s for DC. For Marvel. But wrote a phenomenal article. It's running almost 60 pages, I guess, on Larry Ivy and how important he was to fandom and to certain comic book titles, his input on the creation thereof. But one of the things that I was going through my collection, I went out yesterday and bought a couple hundred My Lights and halfbacks. I'm trying to get my collection all in Mylars. I'm about 80% to 90% done with that, which is kind of cool. I want everything in to be in Mylar, so it'll be nice and safe. But I've come across some letters, not all the letters that I've received back from folks, but certain letters that I've come across that I wrote to comic book companies for various reasons. One of the ones I've got back was from Acclaim, back when Acclaim took over from Valiant and signed with Fabian Nicieza. That's how you pronounce his last name. Sent me back a letter with very specific things, so I know he read my letter because it wasn't just a generic form letter. And again, that's how Valiant was back then. They were very fan-friendly, driven company. And when Fabian took over, he kept that going. Reason I wrote the letter was I didn't like what had happened to Shadow Man. When Garth Ennis and Ashley Wood took over Shadow Man, it was to me one of the most horrendous things that I've seen what someone would want to do to another comic book character in that comic book series. And I'm glad Garth Ennis has risen above the shock value in his writing. This is from 97, so the height of his popularity. But what they did to Shadow Man was, I didn't want to go to it here. If you want to pick up that direct and read it, you can. But it was pretty bad. But anyway, I addressed my concerns, and I was very polite and professional about it. I wasn't, going off on a tangent or anything like that. But Fabian addressed, again, the letter, I look at it this way, the letter could have been that bad if I received a correspondence back from him addressing my concerns. So that was kind of cool. But again, they did fix it, but it wasn't because of me. Now, don't get me wrong. Some things were already in motion when Fabian came in onto the scene, where he had new creators come on board. And another letter I found was from the DC offices. This was from 2004, and their paper stock was kind of cool. Plastic Man there. My man Plas is being a ladder for some folks. This is from Jan Jones, the editorial coordinator at the time, from 2004. My only concern at that time was, why wasn't there a Metal Men series? There should be a Metal Men series drawn by Jim Calafiore. Even, then Jim was my guy, and he was my go-to guy for anything comic book wise. I mean, I wanted that guy on every comic book I can think of. But I know the Metal Men was a series that was lacking in the DCU at the time, and I really wanted to see a Metal Men series drawn by him. But again, they said they had no plans for a Metal Men series, so go figure. But again, is that correspondence, and I've had letters printed in the Buyer's Guide, Comic Book Artist, and it's cool, when you see your letter printed, because, particularly in the Buyer's Guide, because it was more of a literary publication, not to sound pretentious, but the editors of the Buyer's Guide, they pride themselves on correct grammar and punctuation, on that kind of stuff. So when you see a letter printed and it hardly has been touched, by the editors, or what you wanted to say is conveyed there, it makes you feel good. And sometimes if you talk about a certain comic book or a certain publisher, because your address was printed there, they would send you things sometimes. I've got some stuff in the mail from a lot of independent people. Check out my comic, write the Buyer's Guide, let them know what you think, that type of thing. So that was always kind of cool. I've had letters printed in some other publications, some Valiant Comics and Aquaman here and there. But again, back to the difference that it is now, where people are so quick on Instagram and Twitter and everything else, where there's no one sits back and thinks about what they want to say before they say it. And I think if people would do that, I think this level of fandom, meaning YouTube and whatnot, would would evolve into something a little bit better than what it is. Because again, I don't get involved with the bickering and whatnot. Not that um, I'm above that or anything like that. No, not at all. Because some of the stuff that gets said on here, I really want to um, correspond with that person and let them know that hey, nothing's ever happened to me personally. I just know some of my friends on YouTube, acquaintances, and people who are trying to do good things get slammed. So that kind of bugs me. But I digress. But again, I think that if things were a little bit better like Fandom was then, where people were out to share ideas and thoughts and everything else, and become friends more than an enemy on the some fun because of some perceived wrong or wrongdoing or whatever, I think it would be a better place. I think my Fandom was in a sense better back then because you didn't have the keeping up with the Joneses. You didn't have how much is something worth. You people were in it for the medium, for the hobby, for what it is, for the four color artwork, and for the adventures and the excitement that comic books bring. Not for anything else. Not for personal gain. And one of the things I'll talk about is Larry Ivy, which I'll talk about here in a second. Um, but on to before I talk about let me talk about Larry Ivy real quick since we're talking about Fandom. Um, One of the things that I look forward to every month is Alter Ego and Back Issue Magazine. I'm a big history guy when it comes to comic books. I feel you can't understand or appreciate what's going on now by understanding the past and what's come before and appreciating what has come before. That's why my collection is what I want, not the value of something, not because of what it. It's like a more of a historical journey, I think, in my collection than it is what's going on right now. Again, I don't have my pulse on everything, but I like to think that I'm pretty much knowledgeable on what's come before in the past. And because of Alter Ego and because of Back Issue Magazine and other books in my collection about Ditko and Kirby and Wally Wood and publishing of Warren Comics, Dennis Kitchen, people like that, you get a whole understanding of everything. So your focus is different on what you collect. Your focus is different on what you find of interest to put in your comic book collection. Because as long as you like what you collect, you're good to go and enjoy what you have. So, but this issue of Alter Ego, if you look on the cover, it says Justice League. Larry Ivy conceived an idea for the Justice League. If you know, this is dated 59. He had an idea of the Justice League, but it was a little bit different. It was the offspring or the sons and daughters of the original characters, which I think the Justice Legion, which he has here, some of his ideas that he had, but I think that's very cool, the Justice Legion. But his idea was it was in the future, 20 years or something like in the future, and they were the offspring of the Justice Society characters, and that was his idea for the Justice League, And again, Justice League of America came out, so, But Larry Ivy, back to him for a second, was all about Fandom. He had his fingers in everything from Fandom. He had a whole library of Golden Age comics, articles, movie stills, radio shows, reel-to-reel stuff. He made his own home movies, sewn costumes himself, but he was all about Larry Ivy right there. He was all about Fandom, and he corresponded with tons of people who are now professionals in the business. And he had his apartment in New York where they would come and crash and try to get jobs in New York with comic book companies. And they knew Larry Ivy was the guy to go to stay with, to learn about what fandom was, and I can't express more than what's in this article by Sandy Plunkett. But if you pick up this issue, you won't be disappointed. You'll have a different appreciation for what's come before. There's tons of books about fandom. Don't get me wrong. This is not the end all and be all. But the few things I learned about Larry Ivy, I did not know. I have a few of his Monsters and Heroes magazine. This is the only thing I have from Larry Ivy. It's a fanzine. Larry Ivy right up here. He did this awesome fanzine that was pretty much a prozine for the time. And in one of these, like number 5, he does a history of Comic-Con. And going back to what San Diego has turned into, here's some cosplayers at the time from the 60s that Larry Ivy had did a whole article on he does, there's things in here on monsters and movies, and he does his own Ultron Boy, which Larry Ivy was a phenomenal artist himself, and there's reasons why or ideas on why he never made it to the pro circuit. Different. Here's some more, which is a great Superboy, by the way. Right there is pretty cool. And again, written in Golden Age Captain America. Now, you never see that this day and age in a comic book convention, but it shows you how much fandom has changed. Again, to them, it was the Adventures of Captain America. It wasn't, oh my God, this comic book's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. I got to covet it and never touch it, never read it. But, I'm off on a tangent about Larry Ivy, but it's one of those things that I think that if people would take the time enough to pick this up, this alter ego, and read about this, if you're not familiar with fandom or Larry Ivy, do yourself a favor and pick that up. It's tremendous on the ideas he had from the Justice League, the Thunder Agents, how he would redraw, he would get artwork. He had this thing where, I'm going to 17 minutes here, I got something else to talk about. He would go off on this tangent, well, not on tangent, but his idea was how the heroes were created, how the creators wanted them to be. That's how they should be, period. There should be no variations with that. And there are rumors that he would go back and redraw certain panels when he was doing backgrounds for Marvel, that he would redraw Cap's costume to reflect how it was in the 40s, that type of stuff. But he was an interesting individual. Unfortunately, he died alone. Sadly, his knowledge is not with us anymore, but his collection is. It went to an estate. I forgot who it went to, but it is safe and sound. His binders and his writings and everything else, chock full of stuff about comic books. It's still available to us. So, again, this alter ego number 152 from May was last month's May of alter ego. Please pick it up. You will do yourself a favor, and I think you'll appreciate things a lot more. And onward, as I was talking about, one of the things I was doing, going through my comic books, and I was reading Crime Does Not Pay. This is number 120, I think from 48, I think. And I was reading this Daredevil, Olive Gleason publications, but it made me think, and I had to go back and find it, about Bob Wood, one of the editors of Crime Does Not Pay, was actually, and again, here's the article, was actually arrested, and he murdered a woman. They think it might have been his wife, with a flat iron, bludgeoned her to death. So the irony is there, it's Crime Does Not Pay, and here's the editor. there. He, in the sensational press photograph that they did back then. This was 58. Editor of mag called "Crime Does Not Pay: Murders ad woman in a hotel tryst." So it's one of those things that part of comic book history. If you didn't know about it and you want to read about it, you can find it Comic Book Marketplace 102 from 2003. It's all about Liv Gleason, publications, Charles Biro, Hitler, Silver Streak, all that kind of, was it Silver Streak? Yeah, there was about Hitler, Silver Streak in it. Nice stuff here. So this is a good publication to read. I'm on to 20 minutes now. I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but I read the Larry Ivy article and I was just taken aback on how important he was, and if we knew where he was at the time, because there were some professionals who knew of him, who were friends with him, Sadie Plunkett being one of them, who did the article. Would he, maybe been appreciated more in the comic book realm of how we have guests at comic book shows and what have you, that he would be a phenomenal guest to have at comic book conventions. He died in a assisted living facility. I don't know who was by his side, but from the way the article sounds, like he was alone. So maybe his life would have been extended a little bit. I don't know. But I was really taken aback by the article. I went out and I found my 2 Larry Ivy publications that I have. I read those, and it was a labor of love. And again, it's one of those things that you think about it and you read it, and you can take with you and think about how we can improve ourselves here on YouTube, and how we can improve ourselves with one another when we have someone like Larry Ivy who just opened his heart and opened up his home to tons of fans and fandom, and helped build what it is today, and the structure that it's built now. So, but anyway, thanks for hanging in there. If you've not left already because of my rambling, but again, you guys take care. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of the week and a great weekend. And I'll talk to you guys later.